Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
So, today is Wednesday. That means it's when I normally answer your questions. However, I have no questions this week, and that's actually, I would dare say, a good thing, because there's some news that happened yesterday that I definitely want to cover. And no, it's not actually the story that you are probably expecting. It is not the story about Eamon Bundy or the other individuals there at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge that were arrested. One man shot last night. The individual who was shot, I forget his name. It slipped my mind at the moment, and I don't have that directly in front of me right now. But not to, like, put that aside, but there's something that's sort of overshadowed. And yes, I understand that, the situation out there in Oregon, it's definitely a big deal. But there's something that I somehow never knew that this was happening, and it lasted for nearly 35 years. I've actually been right near where this thing was, and somehow I never noticed. And I want to make sure that this woman is remembered the way that she should be. The story comes from UPI, and the headline is "Woman who protested at White House for 35 years dies." And this is something that I never knew about. I never knew that there was this 35-year protest at the White House, or when the last time I was in D.C., it probably would have been about 30 years into the vigil that she had, and I somehow missed this. I never knew about it, and really, I'm kind of sad that I missed this, that I never got to meet this woman, even though I've been to Washington, D.C. I've been right across the street from the White House, and I missed this peace vigil that was ongoing since the early 80s, since August of 1981. But before I get into the story, I just want to mention one thing, that if I seem a little flustered, it's because I kind of am. I got a new computer, got a new laptop, purchased it from eBay, and I've currently got a dual boot on this, and I'm actually very glad that I do have a dual boot. Dual boot meaning that there's two operating systems, so I can switch between Windows, that I don't really want to ever use, but I'm actually using right now, and Linux, which I prefer to use, but I was having problems with Audacity in Linux, so I switched over to the Windows, and I'm actually not using Audacity, which is the program I normally use to record with. I'm using a program that I've never used before called Mixpad, which is part of some suite of editing softwares from NHC or NCH software. It says it in real big letters in the background of the program that I'm recording with. So I'm using a different program. Hopefully everything winds up turning out okay. And, I might have to wind up, recording in Windows unless Audacity starts cooperating in Linux on this machine. And I'm thinking that it might be the machine itself, because there's some kind of driver on here that doesn't really cooperate very well with Linux. But I am going to wind up making it work. And, if I've got to use Windows once a week, then so be it. But let me now get into the story here about Concepcion Picciotto. The story, again, comes from UPI. Concepcion Picciotto, who kept a peace vigil against nuclear weapons outside the White House for 3.5 decades, believed to be the longest protest in American history, died this week at a homeless shelter in Washington, D.C. Picciotto recently suffered a fall, but the cause of her death on Monday was not immediately known. She was a Spanish immigrant, known by many as Connie, and she was believed to have been around 80 years old. She began her anti-nuclear proliferation vigil outside the presidential residence in August of 1981, just 6 months into the administration of Ronald Reagan. But the protest, known as the White House Peace Vigil, was actually started 2 months earlier by activist William Thomas. After that time, she was a regular resident in Lafayette Park on Pennsylvania Avenue, across the street from the north lawn of the White House. Various other activists joined and departed the vigil over the 35-year span, but Picciotto was the only one who remained a permanent fixture. Between August 1981 and January 2016, with more than 12,500 consecutive days of protest under her belt, it is believed that Picciotto's was the longest-running political protest in American history. Now, before I continue with what really is a eulogy of sorts, I forget the proper term that they use, the obituary. It's really a lengthy obituary, but I feel as though this woman deserves some credit. She definitely, again, as far as I have been aware, I have never known about this woman, so I feel as though I want to show her the respect that she deserves that I was never able to give her while she was alive. So, this is something that's important because most people generally do not stick with something for this long. Remember the Occupy protest that started up back in 2011, and there was the claim, we're going to occupy until our demands are met and blah, 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 and then it was, 2 months, and then they all got busted up. Well, this woman had spent 35 years, not quite 35 years, about 34 and a half years living across the street from the White House. She was protesting day in and day out across the street from the White House. More than 12,500 consecutive days. That is, just astronomical. I can't even fathom that. That's almost my entire life. I was born in February of 1978. She began this protest in August of 1981, so I was 3.5 years old when she started this thing. The article here continues. Her nuclear disarmament movement, called Proposition 1, achieved some success in 1993 when a petition circulated by supporters resulted in a ballot initiative passed by Washington, D.C. voters. The initiative never reached the floor, but D.C. congressional delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton aided the measure and introduced it in nearly a dozen sessions of Congress. And this is something that, people get asked all the time, well, what is your activism doing? What are the results? Well, she had some results here, and we'll talk about it. Stay tuned. Peace, love, Liberty Radio.
Hey, this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've been working with computer programmer Derek Slopey to create Fiend Phone. I'm using Fiend Phone right now to talk with and record one of my co-hosts in real time. Take it, Davi.
Hey, this is Davi Barker, and I'm 1,000 miles away from Michael, but we sound like we're in the same room.
We sure do, Davi. So, Davi, please tell the nice people more about Fiend Phone.
Fiend Phone is free, open-source software that opens up a global world of possibilities for collaborative, high-quality remote voice media production, and I'm digging it.
People can try the Windows beta version of Fiend Phone right now at fiendphone.com. But we're also raising money to vastly improve Fiend Phone and vastly improve independent talk media worldwide.
So go to fiendphone.com to help out. Who will build the audio roads? We will, with your help.
That's fiendphone.com. FEENPHONE.com. Foxtrot, Echo, Echo, November, phone.com.
Fiend Phone. I never knew remote audio could be this good.
When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Now, before I get back into the article here, talk about some of the results that were achieved by Concepcion Picciotto, I want to make sure that I tell you something that you can do if you're fed up with the government running every aspect of your life. You need to be listening to the Lava Flow podcast. If you're not, then what is wrong with you? Go right now to thelavaflow.com/listen. The Lava Flow podcast, channeling the flow of information to the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, and agorist community. Subscribe today using any podcatcher at thelavaflow.com/listen. Or you can just go back to sucking up to the government. The Lava Flow podcast, striking the root every episode. That's thelavaflow.com/listen. So back now into what is essentially a lengthy obituary for Concepcion Picciotto, a woman who kept a peace vigil across the street from the White House for nearly 35 years. She began staying there in August of 1981, and she passed away earlier this week. And I just want to go back over this last paragraph from UPI, where it says that she achieved some success in 1993 when a petition circulated by supporters resulted in a ballot initiative being passed by voters in Washington, D.C. The initiative, though, never reached the floor of Congress, but the congressional representative, the non-voting congressional representative from Washington, D.C., Eleanor Holmes Norton, aided the measure and introduced it in nearly a dozen sessions of Congress. In 2013, there was a profile in the newspaper, or rather in a 2013 profile by a newspaper, the Washington Post, although they do not mention that in the UPI article. Profile in the Washington Post, Picciotto said her entire reasoning behind the ongoing vigil was to save the world from nuclear holocaust. Over the years, various signage has accompanied her makeshift residence near Lafayette Park. One said, "Live by the bomb, die by the bomb." Another said, "War is not the answer." And "war is not the answer" is actually the slogan for the National Council of Friends. Or not the council, but they've got a lobbying arm, and that's one of the slogans that they have. I used to have that as a bumper sticker on the back of my Nissan Sentra when I had a Nissan Sentra. But in addition to those signs, the "Live by the bomb, die by the bomb," and "War is not the answer" signs, the sign that stood at Picciotto's vigil for nearly the entire ordeal was one that read, "White House, 24 hours a day, anti-nuclear peace vigil since 1981. Don't be a lemming, save yourself, renounce genocide." Advocates and supporters colloquially referred to Picciotto's post outside the White House as 1601 Pennsylvania Avenue. And let me just one more thing before I continue, because I'm doing this sort of, free flow thought sort of thing. That's how I do, right? You listen to the show. That's why you like the show, because you get to see how my brain works. Although, technically you're not opening up my scalp and watching my brain. You're not putting little probes on my brain and watching neurons fire and whatnot. But, I'll do this thing to where I start talking, and then I have a thought, and then I have to stop saying what I was saying, and then go with my thought, because, that's what I do. going back to the length and duration of this protest, I want to point out that she has been consistently protesting since 1981. Daily, 12,500 plus days. She wasn't protesting only when it was a Republican in office. She wasn't protesting only when it was a Democrat in office. She was protesting all of them. Since Ronald Reagan, she's been protesting. Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama. And there are other people that when they protest war, they only protest when it's, the other party that is doing the war, right? So that there was the woman that was protesting outside of George W. Bush's ranch there in Crawford, Texas, Cindy Sheehan, I think it was, Cindy Sheehan. But she was only protesting against George W. Bush. She's not been doing anything against the illegal, unjust, horrible wars of Barack Obama. She didn't care about any of the illegal, horrible, unjust wars of Bill Clinton, who was the commander-in-chief of the United States military before George W. Bush took over and started bombing more countries. No, she only protested George Bush. This woman, Concepcion Picciotto, has been protesting, well, she did until her death. She protested from August of 1981. The article now gets into some personal information about Concepcion Picciotto, who was lovingly called Connie by many. She was born in Spain, believed to have been in 1935, but not exactly sure. She immigrated to the United States when she was 18. She later worked at the Spanish Embassy in New York City, where she met and married an Italian businessman. A subsequent divorce and custody battle cost her her marriage, her adopted daughter, and her home. She first visited the White House in 1979, believing that the executive branch of the government might be able to help her get her daughter back. Picciotto, though, never saw her toddler daughter again. She said in a recounting of her past on the Vigil's website, "I went to the Congress and the Senate every day, and no one would listen to me." Really, that sums it up quite nicely. That sums up the American government that we have. I went to Congress and I went to the Senate every day, and no one would listen to me. Now, I do have to say that things are slightly different in New Hampshire when dealing with the state government, because I go to the legislature in New Hampshire quite frequently. I was there yesterday. I will be going there again tomorrow. That is assuming that you're listening to this on Wednesday, January 27th, which is the day that I'm recording this. If you're listening to it on another day, then chances are I wasn't in Concord yesterday, might not be going tomorrow, unless you're listening on a Wednesday or a Friday. I generally been going up on Tuesdays. Every now and then I'll go up on a Thursday, and I do. I go talk to legislative committees, and they listen. I've had state reps just, grab me in the hallway, not physically grab me, but, get my attention in the hallway to ask me questions about various things. I've actually had conversations with state reps inside and outside of the State House, inside and outside of committees, inside and outside of the Legislative Office Building. I've had conversations in hotels with state reps, just at various conferences. There were several state reps at the Keenvention that happened back in November. There's going to be several state reps at the Liberty Forum that happens in about another month. And I will be having conversations with several state reps at Liberty Forum. And they are listening. They're trying to bring about more freedom. And if you want that, then you should move to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project. Go to freestateproject.org to learn more about that and more on this. Stay tuned.
The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs, with a story like no other game before. The liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
So before I finish this article here about Concepcion Picciotto, her life, her work, and I would dare say her underappreciated and underrecognized work, I want to make sure that I tell you about something that's not underappreciated or underrecognized, and that would be gold and silver, specifically gold and silver that you purchase from Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. Since 1977, so that they've got this war vigil by about 4 years. Since 1977, Roberts and Roberts has been a trusted source for buying and selling your precious metals like gold and silver, and they take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760. That's 800-874-9760. Or visit them online at rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. Getting into, or back into the article, the lengthy obituary, if you will, of Concepcion Picciotto, known as Connie. She lived across the street from the White House, what was referred to as 1601 Pennsylvania Avenue. She kept a peace vigil, had been doing that since 1981. After meeting with Thomas, that would be the man that started the peace vigil, William Thomas, after meeting with Thomas at his White House peace vigil 2 years later, that being 2 years after she first visited the White House in 1979, Picciotto said she decided to help the children of the world by doing what she could to speak out against nuclear proliferation, since she could no longer help her own child, of whom she lost custody. That's why she went to Washington, because she thought that someone in Congress, someone in the White House would be able to help her, but alas, they could not, and she says they would not even listen. She faced various challenges during her years camped out near the White House. Supporters came and went. Nuclear proponents often gave their 2 cents, and health difficulties, physical and some say psychological, took a toll on her. In 2012, she was injured after being struck by a taxi cab and relied on younger supporters to maintain the vigil as she recovered. She lived for a time at Peace House, a residence of Thomas and his activist girlfriend, Ellen Benjamin Thomas. When Peace House was sold last year, Picciotto took up residence at the N Street Village, a nonprofit shelter for women in the D.C. area. For virtually the entire protest, maintaining the vigil almost became a game of cat and mouse. According to rules by the National Park Service, vigils cannot be left unattended, even for a brief moment. If they are, they can be removed by authorities, and that happened in 2013 when the display was immediately but temporarily taken down by park rangers when the young activists who were staying there to help cover while Picciotto recovered from injuries, they stepped away for a moment and park rangers took it down, but in the end it was put back up. And Picciotto's presence on Pennsylvania Avenue outlasted the entire administration of 4 American presidents. Again, those being Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and nearly through a 5th, that being of Barack Obama. Picciotto said about spending nearly 35 years outside of the White House, "I have to be here. This is my life." And there's a short video accompanying this article. And again, I'll, as I always do, post the links in the show notes where I'll post the link to the article. I'll post the link specifically to the video of Concepcion Picciotto. And you can watch that video at your leisure. I tried watching it. It's hard to understand because she's got kind of an accent and she's talking very softly. So it's not something that would have wound up translating very well if I would have saved and then tried to put into the audio here. I did not find it at the quality that I like things to be. So again, I'll post that in the show notes. You can listen at your leisure if you like. And there's a story that I want to jump into here briefly because it's something that is absolutely mind-blowing to me. The governor of Maine, which is a neighboring state here to New Hampshire, wants to not just bring back the guillotine, but he wants to bring back the guillotine specifically for one purpose and one purpose only, and no, it is not to kill murderers, and it's not even for the reason that some in France use the guillotine. No, he does not want to go off with their heads of corrupt politicians. What Governor LePage wants to do is go after people that commit drug crimes. The story from CNN says that Maine Governor Paul LePage says his state is too easy on drug crimes, suggesting it should bring back the guillotine for serious offenders. The governor, known for his controversial statements, was speaking on local radio Tuesday about combating the drug epidemic in the state, and he told WVOM, "What I think we ought to do is bring the guillotine back. We could have public executions and have, we could have guessing which hole it falls in." He said that he was all in on fighting drug criminals, and a recent proposal to establish a minimum sentence of 4 years for drug traffickers was too lenient. LePage said, quote, "I think the death penalty should be appropriate for people that kill Mainers." Okay, now this is something completely different because his response here was in response to something about minimum sentences for people convicted of drugs, but he says that the death penalty is appropriate for people that kill, he says Mainers, that being people in Maine. Well, now you're talking about murder, and that's a completely different thing. But if you're alleging that everyone that's ever sold any illicit substance is a murderer, then you, Mr. LePage, are absolutely insane. The article continues with more from Governor LePage. He says, "We've got to go 20 years. We've got to keep them here until they die. If you want my honest opinion, we should give them an injection of the stuff they sell." LePage decried his critics, such as the ACLU, and stood firm. Even the host of the show tried to wrap the interview. LePage interrupted to show his resolve, suggesting the guillotine be used for public executions, joking that the idea was part of his French ancestry, saying, quote, "I like French history." There's more to this. It will be in the show notes. And don't forget, every Wednesday I answer your questions when you send those over to AMA at FPPradio.com.